Expatriates being placed around Africa. This is a topic that we're often asked about. Can you give us the key bullets in terms of if we're a business and we're moving expatriate staff around Africa, what do we need to know?
Well, I think again, we're going to try to run through these. We may not be completely exhaustive, but I think the starting point is going to be income tax and look at the host country where you've sent the person to, home country where he's come from, and sometimes a third country, which is where you're paying him from. And which of those ones is he going to pay tax in? And hope the answer is not all three.
And often it can be all three. And I think people, the employee and the employer are often not aware of this. And that kind of begs the second question as to whose
Yeah.
cost is it if PAYE arises in more than one country?
I think even before that, it's a more fundamental point. You're sending the guy to this country. Is he expecting you to pay the tax bill or yourself? And you remember the days of tax equalizations and hypothetical taxes and all those good things. Perhaps less common than they were, but they still happen. Whose economic cost is it? And then how do you get it right? And what happens if the employee hasn't done his bit and the company ends up paying more tax than it thought it had to? Has he fulfilled his own obligations? So yeah, try not to forget those sort of things. And even things like tax returns may not be pay as you earn, although they are those, but they may be personal income tax returns. And a lot of countries expect individuals earning a certain amount of money to file a return. And you probably at least owe it to your employees to remind them of their obligation.
And Russell, is it just PAYE we need to think about in terms of the employee's tax?
Well, I think for the employer, there's something I'm going to come to. But before we get there, the individual himself needs to think about, is he going to be seen as tax resident in the country, and is he going to pay tax on his investment income or his foreign income? And increasingly the answer to that is yes, which then brings you into interpretation of treaties and other good things. But the other one not to forget about is social security. Now, bad of those you might say, well, we'll sort the guy's pension out and hopefully there'll be nothing else. But increasingly, countries are trying to fund their social security systems by taxing foreigners. Now, sometimes it's not too awful. For example, you might have to pay into a government-run pension fund. You'll get a sub-inflation return, but at least when you leave, you get the money back, maybe after a waiting period. But there's at least one country I can think of where they say you will pay the same contribution, but it goes into a special fund that doesn't belong to the employee. It belongs to the government or
Wow.
the agency. Yes.
So I take it you can't get it back when you leave the country then?
You can't get it back, no time, never. No.
Okay, so it's a punitive tax.
It is, and perhaps it's designed to discourage use of expats, but yes, it's fairly well hidden, but it's not very nice. So social security, and the rates of social security in Africa can be quite steep,
Yeah.
especially in francophone countries, and perhaps some of the lusophone. Even some of the more English-speaking countries can be quite hefty charges. Split between employer and employee, not always, very rarely good news.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We've come across many clients who just think about the PAYE and they factor in the PAYE, they plan for the PAYE, and they're very unpleasantly surprised by how high the social security levies are.
Yeah, if you say 25% of remuneration, there are countries which have it at that
Yeah.
level.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's not.
And what about benefits in kind? Because always expats have, or typically expats have quite large perks that come with the move. How are they taxed?
Yeah, that often an area of contention and or lack of thought. And generally speaking, the tax inspectors are going to think there should be tax on it. Now there can be some debates, and you might think, well, are these perks or benefits, or are these necessary? And actually, yeah, the cost of getting the employee there. But even then, tax laws increasingly being phrased in such a way that there's a benefit, there must be some tax on it. You can debate whose it is. Cars, home travel, especially if it's not the travel at the start and the end of the contract. School fees, if you're having your kids sent to a nice school in your home country or somewhere else. Housing, yeah, the only excuse I can see on housing really is if you're in a remote location. I don't mean the capital city of a country that's seen as remote, but I mean some mine hundreds of kilometers out in the bush or something where nobody in the right mind would have their own house and you're probably fly in and fly out. Then there may be a debate on it. But the thing to look at on benefits in kind is to look in the tax law to see if there's any special computation provisions. Because again, housing can often be quite beneficial, but yeah, it still can be a bit annoying if the guy's not really getting benefit from it because he had a perfectly good house in his home country.
And
So
apart from tax, is there anything we need to be aware of when we're moving expats around Africa?
well, yes, I think so. Increasingly so. What currency are you going to pay in, for example? You may struggle to find expats who are very interested in naira or Malawian kwacha.
Yeah.
They prefer to be paid in dollars or rand if that's where their cost base is. So then, if you're going to pay them in that currency, how are you going to deal with the taxes? You're still going to pay them. Somebody is. You're going to have to convert it. Um, have you got how are you going to get a deduction? Because how's that cost? If the local company hasn't got that currency, how's it going to access it? And what does exchange control have to say about passing that cost through to the the employing host country? And is that even feasible? If you can't,
Yeah.
then you're not matching your costs with your income properly.
And again, when we have so many volatile currencies across Africa, this can be a big factor.
It can, yes, it can. Now, sometimes you may find that there's a way of doing it, and you may have to just come to an arrangement with the employee. You can pay him in naira, for example, and you'll help him to get the money out quickly, and perhaps have to subsidise him if he takes a bad rate on it. If there's a big collapse suddenly, but meanwhile you'll help him with filling the forms in every month to his remittance. In other countries, it depends very much on the rules in that country, and yeah, and it becomes a negotiation between employee and employer. How much do you want me to go there? How much do I need the currency
Yeah.
you're offering me?
Yeah. Okay. So apart from the tax implications in terms of the employee itself, can you summarize the corporate tax implications that can arise where we're moving expats around Africa?
Yeah, I think the key point is don't forget about it. So,
Yeah.
and we've seen quite a lot of discussion around this with people talking about digital nomads recently, which perhaps making their own problems. But yes, can the employment create a branch or PA for the employing company? Now, you'd think if it's a properly structured secondment, probably not, but it's certainly feasible. You could, and especially if you're paying the guy in foreign currency, and um, or you're giving some sort of management rights to that employing country. It's very possible to create a branch situation. So it's worth watching out for, and yeah, trying to avoid. So it's not. Don't leave it entirely to your HR department to work out the pay as you earn, and everything else goes away.
Yeah. So again, I think the bottom line here is plan carefully upfront and factor in all of the different tax leakages when you're working out the economics and thus the real cost of moving your staff around Africa.
Yeah, I think the final one is if you've got a guy in a country where you don't even have a company, then you may increasing your risks of branch or PE. And there are some devices that half get around it, or maybe a bit more than that. But it does leave you that extra level of exposure.
Yeah. Okay, Russell. Well, thank you for that. Bottom line, if you're considering moving expatriates around Africa, don't think they just need to pay PAYE in the country to which you move them. They may still need to pay tax at home. They may pay other taxes rather than PAYE. Social Security can be quite hefty. You need to carefully consider the tax implications and all the benefits in kind, and what's going to happen in terms of how you structure the currency payments for their salaries. And you need to think about the corporate tax implications that can arise when you move expats.